Question 1. Which approach would be most effective in optimizing the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance examination application processing while upholding academic integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Relying solely on the applicant's self-declaration of qualifications without any independent verification, assuming honesty and accuracy. Option B. Delegating the final decision-making authority for all applications to junior administrative staff without specific training on Azhar Islamic University Mataram's admission regulations. Option C. Expediting the process by accepting applications with a promise of future document submission, prioritizing the sheer volume of applications processed over immediate verification. Option D. Implementing a multi-stage verification process where initial screening focuses on completeness of mandatory documents, followed by a detailed academic credential review by a dedicated committee for shortlisted candidates, with clear protocols for handling discrepancies. The correct answer is D. Implementing a multi-stage verification process where initial screening focuses on completeness of mandatory documents, followed by a detailed academic credential review by a dedicated committee for shortlisted candidates, with clear protocols for handling discrepancies. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to process applications efficiently and fairly. The pressure to admit a high number of students, coupled with limited resources for thorough verification, can create a conflict. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the admission process adheres to Azhar Islamic University Mataram's established regulations and ethical standards, preventing both the admission of unqualified candidates and the rejection of deserving ones due to procedural flaws. The correct approach involves a systematic review of each application against the stipulated admission criteria, ensuring that all required documentation is present and verified according to the university's internal guidelines for document authentication. This method upholds the principle of fairness and transparency, as it treats every applicant equally and follows established procedures. It aligns with the university's regulatory framework by ensuring that only candidates who meet the defined academic and administrative requirements are considered for admission, thereby safeguarding the academic reputation and standards of Azhar Islamic University Mataram. An approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by accepting applications with incomplete documentation risks violating the university's admission regulations. This could lead to the enrollment of students who do not meet the fundamental requirements, potentially compromising academic quality and creating future administrative burdens. Another incorrect approach, which involves subjective judgment without clear, documented criteria for waiving requirements, introduces bias and lacks transparency. This deviates from the ethical obligation to maintain an impartial and merit-based admission process, potentially leading to accusations of favoritism and undermining trust in the university's admission system. Furthermore, an approach that relies solely on external verification without internal cross-referencing of submitted documents could miss discrepancies that internal checks would reveal, thus failing to meet the university's due diligence standards. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing regulations and internal policies. This involves identifying the core admission criteria and the required supporting evidence. Subsequently, they should assess each application against these criteria, prioritizing accuracy and completeness. When faced with potential ambiguities or exceptions, the framework should include a mechanism for escalation to a designated authority or committee for a consistent and documented decision, ensuring that any deviations from standard procedure are justified and recorded. This systematic and transparent process is crucial for maintaining the integrity of the admissions process. Question 2. Implementation of a new examination administration system at Azhar Islamic University Mataram requires a strategic approach to process optimization. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the university's commitment to academic integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Outsourcing the entire examination management process to a third-party vendor with minimal internal oversight, relying solely on their proprietary systems and protocols. Option B. Streamlining question paper distribution by allowing direct digital transfer to examination centers without prior verification of recipient credentials. Option C. Prioritizing the adoption of advanced digital examination platforms without providing adequate training to invigilators on the new system's operational protocols and security features. Option D. Implementing a comprehensive review of all examination procedures, from question setting to result tabulation, ensuring strict adherence to Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's established regulations and ethical guidelines, with a focus on transparency and auditability. The correct answer is B. Streamlining question paper distribution by allowing direct digital transfer to examination centers without prior verification of recipient credentials. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an academic institution like Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, in ensuring the integrity and fairness of its entrance examination process. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient administration with the paramount importance of upholding academic standards and ethical conduct. Any deviation from established regulations or ethical principles can lead to reputational damage, legal challenges, and a loss of trust from prospective students and the wider community. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both effective and compliant with the university's internal regulations and broader educational guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review and refinement of the existing examination process, focusing on identifying bottlenecks and areas for improvement while strictly adhering to Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's established examination regulations and ethical guidelines. This includes ensuring that all procedural steps, from question paper preparation to result tabulation, are documented, transparent, and auditable. The emphasis is on enhancing efficiency without compromising the security, fairness, and academic rigor of the examination. This approach aligns with the university's commitment to providing a credible and equitable assessment for all applicants, reflecting its core values and educational mission. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes speed by bypassing established security protocols for question paper distribution is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This would violate the principle of examination integrity, potentially leading to unfair advantages for some candidates and undermining the credibility of the entire process. Such an action would contravene the university's internal regulations on examination security and could have severe consequences. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire process to an external vendor without adequate oversight or adherence to the university's specific requirements and ethical standards. While outsourcing can offer efficiency, it must be done within a framework that ensures compliance with local educational laws and the university's own stringent guidelines for examination administration. A lack of internal control and adherence to specific Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram protocols would be a significant failure. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on technological upgrades without considering the human element and the need for comprehensive training for invigilators and administrative staff is also flawed. Technology is a tool, but its effective implementation depends on well-trained personnel who understand and adhere to the established procedures and ethical considerations governing the examination. Neglecting this aspect can lead to errors and breaches of protocol, regardless of the sophistication of the technology used. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic administration must adopt a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the governing regulations and ethical principles specific to their institution. This involves a risk assessment of each proposed process optimization, evaluating its potential impact on fairness, security, and academic integrity. The process should involve consultation with relevant stakeholders, including faculty, administrative staff, and examination committees. Any proposed changes must be evaluated against the established regulatory framework of Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, ensuring that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of compliance or ethical standards. A phased implementation with pilot testing and continuous monitoring is advisable to ensure that the optimized process is both effective and robust. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates a significant number of applicants to the Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram entrance examination have expressed concerns regarding perceived inconsistencies in the marking scheme, potentially impacting their results. The university's internal regulations emphasize the importance of a fair and objective assessment process that accurately reflects candidates' academic capabilities. In light of these concerns, which of the following actions best upholds the university's commitment to academic integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Instruct the examination board to re-evaluate individual applicant scores based on subjective interpretations of their potential, aiming to increase the admission rate. Option B. Publicly acknowledge the concerns and immediately announce a standardized upward adjustment of scores for all candidates to address the perceived inconsistencies. Option C. Defer the decision on admissions until further investigations can be conducted, without providing any interim guidance or reassurance to applicants. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive review of the examination papers and marking rubric by an independent academic committee to identify any objective errors or biases, and propose adjustments based on their findings. The correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive review of the examination papers and marking rubric by an independent academic committee to identify any objective errors or biases, and propose adjustments based on their findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between academic integrity and the pressure to admit a high number of students, potentially compromising the fairness and validity of the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance examination process. The university's commitment to upholding its academic standards and ensuring a merit-based selection process is paramount. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of the examination materials and procedures, focusing on identifying any systemic biases or errors that could have unfairly disadvantaged a segment of applicants. This approach aligns with the university's regulatory framework, which mandates fair and equitable assessment practices. Specifically, it adheres to principles of academic governance that require transparency, accountability, and the continuous improvement of examination processes to ensure they accurately reflect candidates' knowledge and abilities. The ethical imperative is to maintain the credibility of the university and the value of its degrees. An incorrect approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or pressure from external stakeholders to adjust scores without a rigorous, data-driven investigation would be professionally unacceptable. This would violate the regulatory requirement for objective assessment and could lead to accusations of favoritism or corruption, undermining the university's reputation. Another incorrect approach that involves making arbitrary adjustments to pass marks without a clear, documented rationale based on psychometric analysis or a review of the examination's difficulty would also be a failure. This lacks the systematic rigor expected in educational assessment and could be seen as a breach of procedural fairness. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence-based analysis and adherence to established university policies and ethical guidelines. This involves 1. Clearly defining the problem and its potential impact. 2. Gathering all relevant data and evidence. 3. Consulting applicable regulations and ethical codes. 4. Developing and evaluating potential solutions against these criteria. And 5. Implementing the chosen solution with transparency and clear communication. Question 4. During the evaluation of admission applications for Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, an admissions officer notices that a few applicants have minor omissions or slight inconsistencies in their submitted documentation, such as a missing signature on a supplementary form or a date format discrepancy on a transcript. The admissions officer is under pressure to process a large volume of applications quickly to meet enrollment targets. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions officer to ensure a fair and compliant admissions process? Option A. Immediately contact each applicant to request clarification or resubmission of the missing or inconsistent documentation, ensuring all requirements are met before proceeding with the evaluation. Option B. Prioritize applications with complete documentation for initial review and defer the evaluation of those with discrepancies until the end of the application period, hoping the applicants will proactively correct them. Option C. Proceed with the evaluation by making reasonable assumptions or overlooking minor documentation issues to expedite the process, focusing on the overall impression of the applicant's qualifications. Option D. Flag the applications with discrepancies for a senior admissions committee member to make a final decision on whether to accept the documentation or reject the application based on their discretion. Correct answer is C. Proceed with the evaluation by making reasonable assumptions or overlooking minor documentation issues to expedite the process, focusing on the overall impression of the applicant's qualifications. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's need for efficient admissions processing and the ethical imperative to ensure fairness and adherence to established admission criteria. The pressure to expedite the process can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the evaluation. Careful judgment is required to balance efficiency with the fundamental principles of equitable assessment. The correct approach involves a systematic review of all submitted documents against the published admission requirements, ensuring that each applicant is assessed based on the same objective criteria. This upholds the principle of fairness and transparency in the admissions process, which is a cornerstone of academic integrity. Adherence to the university's established admission guidelines, as communicated to prospective students, is paramount. This approach minimizes the risk of bias and ensures that decisions are defensible and in line with the university's stated objectives for student selection. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by overlooking minor discrepancies in submitted documents is professionally unacceptable. This failure to adhere to established procedures can lead to the admission of unqualified candidates, undermining the academic standards of Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. It also creates an unfair advantage for some applicants over others who have meticulously followed the guidelines. Another incorrect approach that involves making subjective judgments about an applicant's potential without a clear basis in the stated admission criteria is also professionally unsound. This introduces an element of personal bias, which is contrary to the principles of objective evaluation. Admissions decisions must be based on verifiable qualifications and adherence to published requirements, not on the personal impressions of the evaluator. Finally, an approach that involves deviating from the established admission criteria to accommodate a particular applicant, even with good intentions, is ethically problematic. This undermines the integrity of the entire admissions process and can lead to perceptions of favoritism or corruption. All applicants must be treated equally under the same set of rules. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and ethical guidelines. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing all relevant university admission regulations and criteria. 2. Applying these criteria consistently and objectively to all applications. 3. Documenting the evaluation process thoroughly. 4. Seeking clarification or guidance from superiors when faced with ambiguous situations or potential conflicts. 5. Maintaining confidentiality and impartiality throughout the process. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that applicants for the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance examination are expected to present their academic background. Considering the university's commitment to Islamic values and academic rigor, which approach best reflects the ethical and professional presentation of one's qualifications? Option A. Focusing exclusively on personal attributes and aspiration, with minimal detail on academic history to avoid scrutiny of past performance. Option B. Presenting a detailed and truthful account of academic achievements, extracurricular activities, and any relevant experiences, highlighting their connection to the chosen field of study, while also acknowledging areas for future growth. Option C. Emphasizing only the most significant academic achievements and awards, while downplaying or omitting any less distinguished academic records or challenges faced during previous studies. Option D. Exaggerating the complexity and outcomes of past academic projects to create a more impressive profile, even if the core facts remain technically true. The correct answer is B. Presenting a detailed and truthful account of academic achievements, extracurricular activities, and any relevant experiences, highlighting their connection to the chosen field of study, while also acknowledging areas for future growth. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an applicant to Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, by requiring them to demonstrate an understanding of how to ethically and effectively present their academic qualifications within the specific context of the university's admission process. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to highlight strengths with the imperative to adhere to academic integrity and the specific guidelines of the entrance examination. Careful judgment is required to avoid misrepresentation or omission that could be construed as dishonest or misleading, thereby jeopardizing their application. The correct approach involves a truthful and comprehensive representation of academic achievements, focusing on relevance to the chosen program of study at Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. This aligns with the ethical principles of honesty and integrity expected of all students, particularly within an Islamic educational institution. Specifically, it adheres to the implied regulatory framework of academic honesty and fair admission practices that govern university entrance examinations in Indonesia, including those at Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. Presenting a clear, factual, and contextually relevant academic profile ensures that the admissions committee can make an informed decision based on genuine merit and suitability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting past successes without acknowledging any areas for development or potential challenges in the new academic environment would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to demonstrate self-awareness and a realistic understanding of the demands of higher education, potentially misleading the admissions committee about the applicant's preparedness. Ethically, it borders on presenting an incomplete or overly idealized picture. Another incorrect approach that involves exaggerating the scope or impact of past academic projects or research, even if based on genuine work, is also professionally unacceptable. This constitutes misrepresentation and violates the principle of academic integrity. Such an approach undermines the trust between the applicant and the university, and could lead to the application being rejected on grounds of dishonesty. A third incorrect approach that omits relevant academic experiences or qualifications that might be perceived as less impressive, but are still truthful and factual, is also professionally unsound. While not outright fabrication, this omission can create a skewed perception of the applicant's capabilities and background. It fails to provide a complete picture for the admissions committee and can be seen as an attempt to manipulate the evaluation process, thus violating ethical standards of transparency. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough review of the university's admission guidelines and a commitment to absolute honesty. Applicants should focus on presenting their qualifications accurately, emphasizing their relevance to the program, and demonstrating a genuine understanding of their strengths and areas for growth. Transparency and integrity are paramount in building a credible application and fostering a positive relationship with the academic institution. Question 6. Performance analysis shows that the current admissions process for the Faculty of Sharia and Law at Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, is experiencing delays in processing applications and a perceived lack of transparency in the final selection of candidates. The university is committed to upholding its Islamic educational values and adhering to Indonesian national educational standards. Which of the following approaches best addresses these issues while ensuring compliance with the university's regulatory framework and ethical obligations? Option A. Implement a standardized, multi-stage review process for all applications, incorporating objective academic assessments and a structured interview component evaluated against predefined criteria, with clear communication of the process to applicants. Option B. Introduce a quota system for applicants from specific regions to increase geographical diversity, prioritizing these applicants in the initial review stages. Option C. Rely more heavily on recommendations from community leaders and religious scholars, giving these recommendations significant weight in the final decision-making process. Option D. Streamline the process by reducing the number of required documents and allowing admissions officers to make more discretionary decisions based on their intuition about candidate suitability. The correct answer is A. Implement a standardized, multi-stage review process for all applications, incorporating objective academic assessments and a structured interview component evaluated against predefined criteria, with clear communication of the process to applicants. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the university's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to maintain academic integrity and fairness in the admissions process. The admissions committee must navigate the ethical imperative of equitable treatment for all applicants while adhering to the specific guidelines and regulations governing entrance examinations at Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing strategies that enhance the effectiveness of the admissions process without compromising its fairness or violating any established university policies or Indonesian educational regulations. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the admissions process to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, focusing on objective criteria and transparent procedures. This aligns with the principles of good governance and fair selection, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated based on merit and suitability for the chosen program. Specifically, it requires an understanding of Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's internal regulations concerning admissions, which likely emphasize academic achievement, adherence to Islamic values in education, and potentially specific criteria for certain faculties. The process should aim to optimize resource allocation in admissions review, ensuring timely and accurate assessment of applications. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes based on anecdotal evidence or personal biases, without a thorough review of existing regulations or data. For instance, prioritizing applicants from specific regions or backgrounds without a clear, justifiable rationale rooted in university policy or national educational objectives would be ethically problematic and potentially discriminatory. Another incorrect approach would be to introduce subjective criteria that are difficult to standardize or audit, thereby undermining the fairness and transparency of the admissions process. This could lead to perceptions of favoritism or bias, damaging the university's reputation and potentially violating principles of equal opportunity in education as enshrined in Indonesian law. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve 1. Understanding the specific regulatory framework, thoroughly reviewing Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's admissions policies, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology, KenningtonCollege regulations, and any relevant Islamic educational guidelines. 2. Data-driven assessment, analyzing existing admissions data to identify trends, disparities, and areas where performance can be improved. 3. Stakeholder consultation, engaging with faculty, admissions staff, and potentially student representatives to gather insights and ensure buy-in. 4. Developing objective criteria, establishing clear, measurable, and unbiased criteria for evaluating applicants. 5. Implementing and monitoring, rolling out the optimized process and continuously monitoring its effectiveness and fairness. 6. Ethical review, ensuring all proposed changes align with ethical principles of fairness, equity, and integrity. Question 7. Operational review demonstrates that during the Al-Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance exam, an invigilator observes a candidate subtly receiving a small, pre-written note from another candidate during a quiet moment. The invigilator is aware of the university's strict policy against any form of cheating or unauthorized assistance during examinations, which is clearly outlined in the examination guidelines provided to all invigilators. What is the most appropriate course of action for the invigilator to take? Option A. Confront the candidates directly and verbally warn them about the consequences of cheating, then allow them to continue with the examination. Option B. Discreetly confiscate the note and the candidate's examination paper, then immediately report the incident and the evidence to the chief invigilator or examination committee. Option C. Make a mental note of the incident and address it after the examination has concluded, without any immediate documentation or reporting. Option D. Ignore the incident to avoid disrupting the examination environment and potentially causing distress to the candidates involved. The correct answer is B. Discreetly confiscate the note and the candidate's examination paper, then immediately report the incident and the evidence to the chief invigilator or examination committee. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical imperative to uphold academic integrity and fairness, particularly within the context of a university entrance examination. The pressure to admit a high number of qualified candidates, coupled with potential resource constraints or the desire to meet enrollment targets, can create an environment where deviations from established examination protocols might be considered. However, the Al-Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance exam regulations strictly prohibit any form of unauthorized assistance or manipulation of examination outcomes. Adherence to these regulations is paramount to maintaining the credibility of the examination process and ensuring that admission is based solely on merit. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the established examination procedures and reporting any observed irregularities to the appropriate examination authorities without delay. This upholds the principle of fairness and equal opportunity for all candidates, as mandated by the university's commitment to an impartial selection process. It directly aligns with the ethical obligation to prevent any compromise of the examination's integrity. An incorrect approach would be to overlook or ignore the observed irregularity. This failure to act constitutes a breach of professional duty and undermines the integrity of the examination. It implicitly condones unfair practices, potentially leading to the admission of unqualified candidates and disadvantaging deserving ones. Another incorrect approach would be to directly intervene and attempt to correct the situation without proper authorization. This bypasses established reporting channels and could lead to further complications or accusations of bias. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the irregularity with other invigilators or candidates in a manner that could be perceived as gossip or speculation, thereby creating an unprofessional atmosphere and potentially compromising the confidentiality of the examination process. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to regulations, ethical conduct, and clear communication. This involves 1. Recognizing the irregularity and its potential impact on the fairness of the examination. 2. Consulting the specific examination guidelines and regulations of Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, to understand the prescribed procedures for handling such situations. 3. Reporting the observed irregularity through the designated channels to the examination supervisors or committee responsible for overseeing the exam. 4. Maintaining strict confidentiality and professionalism throughout the process. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance examination application and processing system is perceived as overly lengthy and complex, leading to potential applicant drop-off. Considering the university's commitment to accessible education and adherence to its established admission regulations, which approach to process optimization would best balance efficiency with the integrity of the selection process. Option A. Significantly reduce the number of required application documents and shorten the submission window to expedite the overall processing timeline. Option B. Prioritize the speed of data entry and initial screening, allowing for the submission of incomplete application forms and deferring detailed verification to a later stage. Option C. Automate the entire selection process using a single, easily measurable criterion, such as the applicant's secondary school graduation year, to speed up decision-making. Option D. Implement a phased review of the application workflow, identifying specific administrative steps that can be streamlined or digitized without altering the core assessment criteria or the depth of candidate evaluation required by Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's admission guidelines. The correct answer is D. Implement a phased review of the application workflow, identifying specific administrative steps that can be streamlined or digitized without altering the core assessment criteria or the depth of candidate evaluation required by Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's admission guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's desire to streamline admissions processes and the ethical imperative to ensure fairness and transparency, particularly within the context of an Islamic university's entrance examination. The need for process optimization must be balanced against the regulatory framework governing admissions, which likely emphasizes merit, equal opportunity, and adherence to established academic standards. Misjudging this balance can lead to regulatory noncompliance, damage to the university's reputation, and potential legal challenges. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing admission processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and proposing solutions that enhance speed and accessibility without compromising the integrity of the selection criteria or violating any specific regulations or guidelines set forth by Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, for its entrance examinations. This approach prioritizes data-driven improvements that are aligned with the university's mission and regulatory obligations. It ensures that any optimization efforts are grounded in a thorough understanding of the current system and its impact on all stakeholders, including applicants and admissions staff. The justification lies in adhering to principles of good governance and administrative efficiency, which are implicitly expected of any educational institution and explicitly required if Azhar Islamic University, Mataram has internal policies or external regulatory mandates for process improvement, an incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the number of application stages without considering the impact on thorough evaluation of applicant qualifications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the core purpose of an entrance examination, which is to assess suitability for higher education. Such an approach could lead to the admission of underqualified candidates, thereby undermining academic standards and potentially violating Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's admission criteria if they are designed to ensure a certain level of academic preparedness. Another incorrect approach that involves automating the selection process entirely based on a single, easily quantifiable metric, such as secondary school GPA, without incorporating other relevant assessment methods, e.g., interviews, aptitude tests, or specific subject-based assessment, as might be stipulated by the university's framework, would also be professionally unsound. This approach fails to recognize that a holistic evaluation is often necessary for academic admissions and could contravene Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's specific admission requirements if they mandate a multifaceted assessment. It also risks overlooking candidates who may excel in other areas crucial for academic success, but might have a slightly lower GPA. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of processing over the accuracy and completeness of applicant data would be detrimental. This could involve accepting incomplete applications or rushing the verification of documents, leading to errors in the admissions list. Such a practice directly violates the principle of due diligence and could result in administrative chaos, incorrect admissions, and potential legal repercussions if the university's regulations require meticulous data handling and verification. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a comprehensive understanding of the existing admission framework, including any specific regulations or guidelines from Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. This should be followed by a stakeholder consultation to gather feedback on pain points. Subsequently, potential optimization strategies should be developed, with each strategy rigorously assessed for its impact on fairness, transparency, academic integrity, and regulatory compliance. Pilot testing and continuous monitoring are crucial to ensure that implemented changes achieve the desired efficiencies without compromising the quality and ethical standards of the admissions process. Question 9. The audit findings indicate that the admissions committee at Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, has been inconsistently applying the established protocol for verifying the authenticity of foreign academic transcripts, leading to a higher than acceptable rate of unverified documents being accepted. Which of the following represents the most appropriate immediate response to these findings? Strictly adhering to the university's internal regulatory framework for admissions. Option A. Expedite the processing of all pending applications to clear the backlog, deferring a detailed review of the audit findings until after the current admissions cycle has concluded. Option B. Issue a general memo to all admissions staff reminding them of the importance of transcript verification, without delving into the specifics of the audit findings or proposing concrete procedural changes. Option C. Immediately convene a meeting with the admissions committee to review the specific audit findings, cross-reference the identified discrepancies with the university's official admission regulations and transcript verification guidelines, and develop a targeted corrective action plan to address the identified procedural gaps. Option D. Implement a new, more complex transcript verification system, without first assessing whether the existing system's failures were due to misapplication or inherent flaws, and without consulting the admissions committee on the proposed changes. Correct answer is C. Immediately convene a meeting with the admissions committee to review the specific audit findings, cross-reference the identified discrepancies with the university's official admission regulations and transcript verification guidelines, and develop a targeted corrective action plan to address the identified procedural gaps. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in the university's adherence to its own internal regulations concerning student admissions, specifically regarding the verification of academic transcripts. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient admissions processing with the imperative of maintaining academic integrity and upholding the university's established procedures. Failure to address such findings promptly and appropriately can lead to reputational damage, erosion of trust among stakeholders, and potential future compliance issues. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the specific audit findings, cross-referencing them with the Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's official admission regulations and guidelines. This entails identifying the exact nature of the discrepancy in transcript verification, determining if it constitutes a systemic issue or an isolated incident, and then implementing corrective actions that are aligned with the university's stated policies. This might involve retraining admission staff, revising the verification checklist, or enhancing the oversight mechanism for transcript review. The justification for this approach lies in its commitment to due process, adherence to institutional rules, and the principle of maintaining academic standards, which are fundamental to the credibility of any educational institution, particularly one with religious affiliations like Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings without proper investigation, perhaps due to perceived time constraints or a desire to avoid administrative burden. This failure to engage with the audit report directly contravenes the spirit of accountability and continuous improvement expected within any organized institution. Another incorrect approach would be to implement superficial changes that do not address the root cause of the identified discrepancies, such as merely updating a form without reinforcing the underlying verification protocols. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to genuine process optimization and risks recurrence of the same issues. Furthermore, an approach that involves making exceptions to established verification procedures without clear, documented justification and approval from the relevant authorities would also be professionally unsound, as it undermines the integrity of the admission process and sets a dangerous precedent. Professionals in such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This begins with a clear understanding of the problem as presented by the audit findings. Next, they must consult the relevant internal policies and external regulatory frameworks, if applicable, though for this exam, internal university regulations are paramount. Then, they should identify potential solutions, evaluating each against the established rules and ethical considerations. The chosen solution must be practical, effective, and demonstrably compliant with the university's governance. Finally, a plan for implementation and monitoring should be developed to ensure the corrective actions are sustained. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that a candidate for admission to Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, has been accused of plagiarism in their submitted essay. The university's internal regulations, influenced by both Islamic ethical principles and national educational laws, prohibit academic dishonesty. The admissions committee must decide how to proceed. Which of the following approaches best reflects the required adherence to both Islamic ethical teachings and Indonesian educational regulations? Option A. Immediately disqualify the candidate based on the accusation, without further investigation, to uphold the university's reputation. Option B. Refer the matter to a religious council for an immediate ruling based solely on religious interpretations, disregarding established university procedures. Option C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the accusation, providing the candidate an opportunity to respond, while considering relevant Islamic principles of justice and fairness alongside national regulations on academic integrity. Option D. Dismiss the accusation as a minor issue, focusing primarily on the candidate's academic scores, as the university's primary goal is to attract high-achieving students. The correct answer is A. Immediately disqualify the candidate based on the accusation, without further investigation, to uphold the university's reputation. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the understanding of ethical principles and regulatory compliance within the context of an Islamic university's entrance examination. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires candidates to demonstrate not only academic aptitude, but also a strong moral compass and adherence to the specific ethical and regulatory framework governing educational institutions in Indonesia, particularly those with an Islamic foundation like Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. The challenge lies in discerning genuine understanding from rote memorization and ensuring that the chosen approach aligns with the university's values and the national educational standards. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integration of Islamic ethical teachings with the principles of academic integrity and fairness as mandated by Indonesian educational regulations. This means that when faced with a situation requiring ethical judgment, the candidate must demonstrate an understanding of how Islamic jurisprudence (fiqh) informs ethical conduct in an academic setting, alongside adherence to the general principles of honesty, transparency, and non-discrimination outlined in Indonesian law concerning education. This approach is right because it reflects the dual mandate of the university to provide quality education grounded in Islamic values and to operate within the legal framework of the nation. Specifically, it aligns with the spirit of Pancasila and the principles of national education that emphasize morality and integrity, as well as the specific directives for Islamic higher education institutions. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on secular ethical principles without considering the Islamic context, or conversely, to apply religious principles in a way that contradicts established legal or administrative procedures for university admissions. For instance, an approach that suggests favoring candidates based on personal religious piety without objective academic merit would be ethically and legally flawed, violating principles of fairness and equal opportunity enshrined in Indonesian law. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the importance of transparency and due process in admissions, perhaps by suggesting that subjective interpretations of religious texts should override established admission criteria, thereby undermining the integrity of the examination process and potentially leading to unfair outcomes. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic evaluation of the problem through the lens of both Islamic ethical teachings and national educational regulations. Candidates should first identify the core ethical dilemma, then consider relevant Islamic principles, e.g., justice, honesty, accountability, and finally assess how these principles interact with the specific rules and guidelines governing university admissions in Indonesia. The goal is to arrive at a solution that is both religiously sound and legally compliant, upholding the integrity and fairness of the educational institution. Question 11. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of identity impersonation and a high impact on academic integrity if successful during the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance examination. Which of the following approaches best addresses this risk while adhering to the university's examination framework? Option A. Increase the number of invigilators significantly to create a more intimidating environment for potential impersonators. Option B. Focus on expediting the examination process to reduce the time window for potential misconduct, even if it means slightly less stringent identity checks. Option C. Implement enhanced identity verification protocols, including biometric scanning and cross-referencing with official identification documents, alongside refresher training for invigilators on recognizing fraudulent attempts. Option D. Introduce a policy allowing candidates to use any form of identification, as long as they are registered for the exam, to streamline the entry process. The correct answer is C. Implement enhanced identity verification protocols, including biometric scanning and cross-referencing with official identification documents, alongside refresher training for invigilators on recognizing fraudulent attempts. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the applicant to interpret a risk matrix within the specific context of Al-Azhar Islamic University Mataram's entrance examination regulations. The challenge lies in applying general risk assessment principles to a unique institutional framework, ensuring that the chosen approach aligns with the university's academic integrity standards and examination guidelines. Careful judgment is needed to distinguish between proactive risk mitigation and reactive, potentially compromising, measures. The correct approach involves identifying the highest risk factors and proposing mitigation strategies that uphold the integrity of the examination process, such as enhancing proctor training and implementing stricter identity verification. This aligns with the ethical imperative of ensuring a fair and equitable assessment for all candidates, a core principle in academic institutions. Specifically, it reflects the spirit of academic governance and the need for robust examination procedures as implicitly understood within the framework of a reputable Islamic university like Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, which would prioritize fairness and prevent any form of academic misconduct. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of invigilators without addressing the root causes of potential risks, such as inadequate training or unclear guidelines, fails to optimize resource allocation and may not effectively prevent misconduct. overlooks the importance of quality in supervision. Another incorrect approach that suggests relaxing security measures to accommodate a larger applicant pool directly compromises the integrity of the examination and violates the fundamental principle of fairness. This would be ethically unacceptable and likely contravene any implicit or explicit regulations regarding examination security. A third incorrect approach that involves prioritizing speed of processing over thoroughness in risk assessment could lead to overlooking critical vulnerabilities, thereby increasing the likelihood of examination irregularities. This demonstrates a failure in due diligence and a disregard for the meticulousness expected in academic administration. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic evaluation of potential risks, an understanding of the relevant institutional policies and ethical considerations, and the development of practical, integrity-preserving solutions. The process involves identifying the problem, assessing its potential impact, devising multiple solutions, evaluating each solution against established criteria, in this case, university regulations and ethical standards, and selecting the most appropriate and effective course of action. Question 12. Investigation of the Azhar Islamic University, Mataram Entrance Exam Admission Committee's handling of an application where a prominent community leader strongly advocates for a candidate who narrowly missed the minimum score for a highly competitive program, presenting a dilemma between upholding strict admission criteria and acknowledging the potential of the candidate. Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the candidate's entire application file, cross-referencing all submitted documents against the established admission criteria and university regulations, and present the findings objectively to the admissions committee for a collective decision based on the predefined scoring rubric. Option B. Inform the community leader that the candidate did not meet the minimum requirements and suggest alternative programs, while proceeding with the admission of other candidates who met the criteria without further consideration of this specific case. Option C. Discreetly adjust the candidate's score or reevaluate certain components of their application in a manner that would bring them above the minimum threshold, without informing the rest of the committee of the external influence. Option D. Expedite the admission of the candidate based on the community leader's recommendation, assuming the candidate possesses unquantifiable potential that outweighs the slight shortfall in the numerical score. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the candidate's entire application file, cross-referencing all submitted documents against the established admission criteria and university regulations, and present the findings objectively to the admissions committee for a collective decision based on the predefined scoring rubric. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between academic integrity and the pressure to admit qualified students. The Azhar Islamic University, Mataram entrance exam regulations, while not explicitly detailed here, are understood to prioritize fairness, transparency, and adherence to established admission criteria. The university's commitment to Islamic principles likely emphasizes honesty and ethical conduct in all its processes, including admissions. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial review of all applications, strictly adhering to the published admission criteria and procedures. This ensures that the selection process is equitable and based on merit, upholding the university's reputation and the trust placed in its admissions committee. Any deviation from established criteria, even with the intention of accommodating a deserving candidate, risks compromising the integrity of the examination and admission process, potentially leading to accusations of favoritism or unfairness. This aligns with the ethical obligation to treat all applicants equally and to maintain the credibility of the academic institution. An incorrect approach would be to bypass the established review process for a candidate based on a personal recommendation, even if that candidate is perceived as highly deserving. This undermines the principle of meritocracy and can create a precedent for preferential treatment, violating the spirit of fair competition that should govern entrance examinations. Another incorrect approach would be to alter the admission criteria retrospectively to accommodate a specific candidate. This is a direct violation of procedural fairness and transparency, as all applicants should be evaluated against the same predefined standards. Finally, an approach that involves withholding information about the candidate's qualifications from the admissions committee to influence their decision would be ethically reprehensible, as it involves deception and undermines the collective decision-making process. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and regulations. This involves a commitment to transparency, fairness, and impartiality. When faced with difficult cases or external pressures, the framework should guide them to seek clarification on policies, consult with superiors or relevant committees, and always act in a manner that upholds the integrity and reputation of the institution. The focus should always be on the established process and criteria, ensuring that decisions are defensible and ethically sound. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows a need to enhance the efficiency of the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance examination process. Considering the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair selection, which of the following strategies would be the most appropriate for process optimization? Option A. Modifying the weighting of certain examination sections based on perceived difficulty, without formal academic consultation or validation, to accelerate the final score calculation. Option B. Focusing on improving the logistical flow of candidate registration and examination room allocation, alongside a review of instruction clarity, to ensure a smoother examination day experience without changing academic content. Option C. Introducing a system where a subset of candidates' papers are graded by a single examiner to expedite the overall grading process, regardless of the complexity of the subject matter. Option D. Implementing a pilot program for a new, unproven assessment module that significantly alters the nature of questions asked in specific subjects, aiming to reduce grading time. The correct answer is D. Implementing a pilot program for new, unproven assessment module that significantly alters the nature of questions asked in specific subjects, aiming to reduce grading time. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain academic integrity and fairness during an entrance examination. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient assessment with the imperative to uphold the credibility of the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance exam. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any process optimization does not inadvertently compromise the principles of equal opportunity and unbiased evaluation, which are fundamental to educational institutions. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing examination process to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, without altering the core assessment criteria or introducing biases. This aligns with the university's commitment to a transparent and equitable selection process. Specifically, focusing on streamlining administrative tasks, improving the clarity of instructions, or enhancing the logistical flow of the examination day, while keeping the academic content and evaluation standards consistent, is ethically sound and professionally responsible. This approach respects the established academic standards and ensures that all candidates are assessed on the same academic merit, adhering to the spirit of fair competition. An incorrect approach that involves introducing new, untested assessment methods or altering the weighting of existing sections without prior academic review and approval would be ethically problematic. This could lead to an unfair advantage for some candidates or disadvantage others, undermining the validity of the examination. Furthermore, any optimization that compromises the security and integrity of the examination materials or process would be a direct violation of academic regulations and ethical standards, potentially leading to legal repercussions and reputational damage for the university. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of evaluation over accuracy and thoroughness, potentially leading to misjudgments and incorrect admissions decisions, which is contrary to the university's mission of selecting qualified students. Professionals tasked with optimizing examination processes should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes fairness, transparency, and adherence to established academic and ethical guidelines. This involves a thorough understanding of the university's regulations and the specific objectives of the entrance examination. The process should begin with a comprehensive audit of the current system, followed by the identification of potential improvements that are aligned with ethical principles and regulatory requirements. Any proposed changes should be rigorously tested and validated to ensure they do not negatively impact the fairness or validity of the assessment. Collaboration with academic stakeholders and adherence to university governance structures are crucial steps in ensuring that any optimization efforts are both effective and ethically sound. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows that candidates are expected to demonstrate an understanding of ethical conduct relevant to their academic pursuits at Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. If a candidate encounters a situation during the entrance examination where they are unsure about the ethical implications of a particular action, which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Focus solely on achieving the highest possible score without undue concern for the methods employed. Option B. Prioritize personal gain or convenience to ensure the best possible outcome for the examination. Option C. Seek external assistance or fabricate information to improve performance and ensure a favorable result. Option D. Prioritize adherence to the principles of Islamic jurisprudence and the specific ethical guidelines established by Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, in all academic and professional conduct. The correct answer is D. Prioritize adherence to the principles of Islamic jurisprudence and the specific ethical guidelines established by Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, in all academic and professional conduct. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the understanding of ethical principles and regulatory compliance within the context of an Islamic university's entrance examination. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires candidates to demonstrate not only academic aptitude, but also a strong moral compass and adherence to specific Islamic ethical frameworks as interpreted by Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. The challenge lies in distinguishing between superficial knowledge and genuine ethical reasoning, especially when faced with situations that might present conflicting priorities or require nuanced judgment. The correct approach involves prioritizing adherence to the principles of Islamic jurisprudence and the specific ethical guidelines established by Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, in all academic and professional conduct. This approach is right because it directly aligns with the foundational values and regulatory framework of the institution. Specifically, it emphasizes the importance of honesty, integrity, and fairness, which are paramount in Islamic ethics and are likely to be reflected in the university's academic regulations and student conduct codes. By choosing this approach, candidates demonstrate an understanding that their actions must be guided by the institution's specific ethical and regulatory environment, ensuring that their pursuit of knowledge is conducted in a manner that is both academically sound and morally upright according to the university's standards. An incorrect approach that prioritizes personal gain or convenience over ethical considerations would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the core tenets of Islamic ethics, which condemn dishonesty and self-serving behavior. Such an approach violates the implicit trust placed in students by the university and undermines the integrity of the academic process. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on achieving the highest possible score without regard for the methods used would also be ethically flawed. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of the purpose of education within an Islamic framework, which emphasizes not just achievement, but the manner in which it is attained. It suggests a utilitarian view that may overlook the importance of ethical means in reaching an end, a concept often scrutinized in Islamic ethical discourse. A further incorrect approach that involves seeking external assistance or fabricating information to improve performance would represent a severe breach of academic integrity and ethical conduct. This directly contravenes principles of honesty and truthfulness, which are fundamental in Islamic teachings and are likely to be explicitly prohibited by the university's academic regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the governing ethical principles and regulations of the institution. Candidates should first identify the core ethical values at play, then consider how these values are codified within the specific rules and guidelines of Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. When faced with a choice, the decision that best upholds these principles and regulations, even if it presents a more challenging path, should be selected. This involves a conscious effort to align personal actions with institutional expectations and Islamic ethical imperatives. Question 15. When evaluating an applicant for admission to Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, whose family member is a highly respected figure within the local community, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure adherence to the university's admission regulations and ethical standards? Option A. Expedite the admission process for the applicant and grant them a place, acknowledging the recommendation from the respected community figure as a significant factor in the decision. Option B. Conduct a thorough assessment of the applicant's academic records, entrance examination scores, and any other qualifications stipulated in the official admission guidelines, ensuring the decision is based solely on these objective criteria, irrespective of the family connection. Option C. Seek guidance from the influential family member on how best to accommodate the applicant's admission, prioritizing their wishes to maintain a positive relationship. Option D. Inform the applicant that, due to the influential family connection, a special interview will be arranged to gauge their suitability beyond the standard admission requirements. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough assessment of the applicant's academic records, entrance examination scores, and any other qualifications stipulated in the official admission guidelines, ensuring the decision is based solely on these objective criteria, irrespective of the family connection. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's established admission policies and the potential for a deviation based on external influence. Maintaining the integrity of the admission process is paramount, ensuring fairness and adherence to the Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's established regulatory framework. The university's admission guidelines are designed to provide a transparent and equitable selection process for all prospective students. The correct approach involves a rigorous and impartial evaluation of all applicants based solely on the criteria outlined in the university's official admission regulations. This means assessing the candidate's academic qualifications, adherence to any specific program prerequisites, and performance in any standardized entrance examinations or interviews as stipulated by the university. This approach upholds the principles of fairness, transparency, and meritocracy, which are fundamental to the ethical conduct of academic institutions and are implicitly supported by the regulatory framework governing university admissions in Indonesia, including those specific to Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. An incorrect approach would be to allow the influence of a prominent figure to override or unduly sway the admission decision. This could manifest as prioritizing the candidate due to the recommendation without a thorough review of their qualifications against the established criteria. Such an action would violate the university's admission policies, potentially creating an unfair advantage for one applicant over others and undermining the credibility of the entire admission process. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold impartiality and could be seen as a form of favoritism, which is contrary to the principles of good governance and academic integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to create a special, unannounced criterion for this particular applicant, deviating from the published admission rules. This would also breach the regulatory framework and erode trust in the university's admission procedures. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and regulations. This involves a systematic review of all applications against predefined, objective criteria. When faced with external recommendations or influences, the professional's duty is to ensure that these do not compromise the integrity of the process. The decision must be justifiable based on the university's published admission guidelines and ethical standards. If a recommendation is received, it should be treated as supplementary information that is then assessed within the established framework, not as a directive to bypass it. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual clustering of stylistic similarities and identical phrasing across multiple student submissions for a core essay assignment, raising concerns about potential academic misconduct. According to the Academic Integrity Guidelines of Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, what is the most appropriate initial course of action for the faculty member overseeing the course? Option A. Publicly discuss the flagged submissions with other faculty members to seek their opinion on the likelihood of plagiarism. Option B. Ignore the system's alert as it may be prone to false positives and avoid potential student complaints. Option C. Immediately report the students for academic misconduct and initiate disciplinary proceedings based on the system's alert. Option D. Conduct a preliminary review of the flagged submissions to identify specific instances of similarity and gather preliminary evidence before any further action. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the students for academic misconduct and initiate disciplinary proceedings based on the system's alert. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential breach of academic integrity by flagging unusual patterns in student submissions. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a delicate balance between upholding the university's standards, ensuring fairness to students, and adhering to the specific regulatory framework of Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. The challenge lies in interpreting the data accurately and taking appropriate action without making unsubstantiated accusations, which could have serious consequences for students and the institution's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough, multi-stage investigation that prioritizes due process and evidence-based decision-making. In line with Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's academic regulations and ethical guidelines, this approach begins with a preliminary review of the flagged submissions to identify specific anomalies. If these anomalies persist and suggest a potential violation, the next step is to gather further evidence, which might include comparing submissions, examining timestamps, and considering contextual factors. Crucially, before any disciplinary action is taken, the student must be given an opportunity to explain their work and any perceived irregularities. This aligns with the principles of fairness and natural justice often embedded in university regulations, ensuring that accusations are not made lightly and that students have a chance to defend themselves. The final decision must be based on a comprehensive assessment of all evidence and the student's response, adhering strictly to the university's established disciplinary procedures. An approach that immediately assumes guilt and imposes penalties based solely on the monitoring system's alert is ethically and regulatorily flawed. This bypasses the essential steps of investigation and student consultation, violating the principle of innocent until proven guilty and the right to a fair hearing. Such an action would likely contravene Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's internal regulations concerning academic misconduct, which typically mandate a formal investigation process. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the monitoring system's findings without any further inquiry, even if the anomalies appear significant. This failure to investigate potential breaches of academic integrity undermines the university's commitment to upholding academic standards and could lead to a perception that such violations are tolerated. It neglects the responsibility of the institution to maintain a fair and honest academic environment, potentially violating guidelines that require proactive measures against academic dishonesty. A third incorrect approach might involve sharing the preliminary findings with other students or faculty without proper authorization or a confirmed violation. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could lead to reputational damage for the student involved, even if no misconduct is ultimately found. University regulations typically emphasize the privacy of student records and disciplinary proceedings, and premature disclosure is a serious ethical and regulatory lapse. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic review of university policies on academic integrity and disciplinary procedures. Professionals must first understand the scope and limitations of the monitoring system. They should then follow a defined protocol for investigating flagged incidents, which includes evidence gathering, consultation with relevant academic departments or committees, and providing the student with a clear opportunity to respond. Transparency in the process, adherence to established timelines, and documentation of all steps are crucial for ensuring fairness and compliance with Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's regulatory framework. Question 17. Analysis of the process for addressing a student accused of plagiarism in their final thesis at Al-Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, requires careful consideration of the university's academic integrity regulations. If a student, facing significant personal and financial challenges that have demonstrably impacted their ability to focus on their studies, is found to have plagiarized a small section of their thesis, which of the following approaches best aligns with the university's regulatory framework and ethical obligations? Option A. Impose a minimal penalty, such as a warning, without a formal investigation, to avoid further distress for the student. Option B. Immediately fail the student in their thesis and recommend expulsion from the university due to the zero-tolerance policy on plagiarism. Option C. Overlook the plagiarism due to the student's documented financial and personal hardships, focusing instead on their overall academic effort. Option D. Conduct a thorough investigation according to the university's established disciplinary procedures, allowing the student to present their case and any mitigating circumstances before determining an appropriate sanction. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough investigation according to the university's established disciplinary procedures, allowing the student to present their case and any mitigating circumstances before determining an appropriate sanction. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's established academic integrity policies and the potential for a student to face undue hardship if those policies are applied rigidly without considering mitigating circumstances. The need for careful judgment arises from the university's responsibility to uphold academic standards while also fostering a supportive learning environment. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation into the student's alleged academic misconduct, adhering strictly to the Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's established disciplinary procedures. This approach is ethically and regulatorily justified because it ensures fairness to all students by applying the same standards and processes. It respects the university's academic integrity framework, which is designed to maintain the credibility of its degrees and the learning environment. The process should include providing the student with an opportunity to present their case, allowing for a balanced decision based on evidence and established rules. This aligns with principles of natural justice and due process, which are fundamental in academic institutions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the student without a formal investigation, citing a strict interpretation of the academic misconduct policy. This fails to uphold the principle of due process, as the student is denied the right to a fair hearing and to present mitigating factors. It also risks an arbitrary application of rules, potentially leading to an unjust outcome and damaging the university's reputation for fairness. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the alleged misconduct entirely due to the student's financial difficulties. While empathy is important, ignoring academic integrity violations undermines the value of education and creates an unfair advantage for the student in question over their peers. This approach violates the university's regulatory framework on academic honesty and ethical standards, as it suggests that personal circumstances can override established rules of conduct. A third incorrect approach would be to impose a penalty that is disproportionately severe given the nature of the alleged misconduct and the student's circumstances, without a proper assessment of intent or impact. This would also be a failure of due process and could be seen as punitive rather than corrective, potentially violating the spirit of the university's disciplinary guidelines. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly identify the alleged violation and the relevant university policies. Second, initiate a formal investigation process as outlined in the Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's regulations. Third, ensure the student is informed of the allegations and their rights, including the right to respond and present evidence. Fourth, gather all relevant evidence impartially. Fifth, convene the appropriate disciplinary committee or body to review the case and make a decision based on the evidence and established policies, considering any presented mitigating factors within the framework of the regulations. Finally, communicate the decision and any sanctions clearly to the student. Question 18. Process analysis reveals that during the Azhar Islamic University, Mataram entrance examination application review, a senior faculty member informally suggests prioritizing applications from individuals they know personally, citing their potential contributions to the university. This suggestion is made outside of the formal review committee meetings and without any documented basis in the published admission criteria. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions officer responsible for processing these applications? Option A. Consider the senior faculty member's suggestion and give some weight to the recommended applicants, assuming their potential contributions are valuable. Option B. Discreetly overlook minor inconsistencies in the application documents of the recommended applicants to facilitate their admission. Option C. Expedite the review process for the recommended applicants to ensure their applications are processed promptly, even if it means slightly deviating from the standard timeline. Option D. Evaluate all applications strictly based on the published admission criteria and established procedures, disregarding any informal suggestions or personal recommendations. The correct answer is D. Evaluate all applications strictly based on the published admission criteria and established procedures, disregarding any informal suggestions or personal recommendations. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in ensuring the integrity of the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance examination process, specifically concerning the equitable treatment of all applicants. The core issue lies in potential preferential treatment or undue influence that could compromise the fairness and transparency expected of an academic institution. Adherence to the university's established regulations and ethical guidelines is paramount to maintaining public trust and ensuring that admission is based solely on merit and adherence to stated criteria. The correct approach involves a rigorous and impartial review of all applications, strictly adhering to the published admission criteria and procedures. This ensures that every applicant is evaluated on the same objective standards, preventing any form of bias or favoritism. This aligns with the ethical principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability, which are fundamental to academic institutions and are implicitly or explicitly covered by university regulations governing admissions. Such an approach upholds the integrity of the examination process and ensures that only qualified candidates are admitted, thereby safeguarding the university's reputation. An incorrect approach would be to consider personal connections or recommendations from influential individuals when evaluating applications. This directly violates the principle of equal opportunity and fairness, as it introduces subjective criteria that are not part of the official admission requirements. Such actions could lead to the admission of less qualified candidates, undermining the academic standards of the university, and potentially creating grounds for legal or ethical challenges. Another incorrect approach is to deviate from the established timeline for application submission or review, even if it appears to benefit a particular applicant. This undermines the procedural fairness of the examination process. All applicants must be subject to the same deadlines and review periods to ensure a level playing field. Allowing exceptions based on external pressures or perceived urgency creates an unfair advantage and erodes the credibility of the admission system. A third incorrect approach is to overlook minor discrepancies in application documents if they are from an applicant with a perceived advantage. While some flexibility might be permissible in certain administrative contexts, in an entrance examination, strict adherence to documentation requirements is crucial for maintaining objectivity and preventing the appearance of impropriety. Overlooking such issues can be seen as a form of preferential treatment, compromising the integrity of the selection process. The professional decision-making process in such situation should begin with a clear understanding of the university's admission regulations and ethical code. When faced with a situation that could compromise fairness, a professional should first consult these guidelines. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification from the relevant university authorities or admissions committee is the next step. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all decisions are justifiable, transparent, and in strict accordance with established procedures, prioritizing merit and equal opportunity for all applicants. Question 19. Benchmark analysis indicates that students preparing for the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance exam often face challenges in understanding the university's specific academic integrity policies. A prospective student has gathered research materials from various online academic journals and books for their application essay. They have paraphrased extensively, but are unsure if every idea and sentence structure derived from these sources requires explicit citation according to Azhar Islamic University Mataram's guidelines. What is the most ethically sound and compliant approach for this student to ensure their essay adheres to the university standards? Option A. Utilize AI-powered tools to rephrase all borrowed content to a degree that it appears entirely original, thereby circumventing the need for explicit citation of the original sources. Option B. Assume that extensive paraphrasing is sufficient to avoid plagiarism, as long as the student has not directly copied sentences verbatim, and proceed with submitting the essay without further verification of citation requirements. Option C. Thoroughly review Azhar Islamic University Mataram's official academic integrity policy and citation guidelines, ensuring all paraphrased content and direct quotes are properly attributed in the specified format, and seek clarification from the admissions office if any aspect remains unclear. Option D. Focus on the overall quality and originality of the essay's arguments, believing that minor instances of unacknowledged paraphrasing will be overlooked by the admissions committee given the competitive nature of the entrance exam. The correct answer is C. Thoroughly review Azhar Islamic University Mataram's official academic integrity policy and citation guidelines, ensuring all paraphrased content and direct quotes are properly attributed in the specified format, and seek clarification from the admissions office if any aspect remains unclear. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for an aspiring student at Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, concerning the ethical implications of academic integrity and the university's specific guidelines. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the desire to perform well with the obligation to uphold honesty and adhere to established academic rules. Misinterpreting or circumventing these rules, even with good intentions, can lead to severe academic penalties and damage one's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to Azhar Islamic University, Mataram's academic regulations regarding plagiarism and proper citation. This means acknowledging all sources of information, whether directly quoted or paraphrased, in the prescribed format. This upholds the university's commitment to academic honesty, which is a fundamental ethical principle in Islamic scholarship and education. It demonstrates respect for intellectual property and ensures that the student's work is a genuine reflection of their own understanding and effort. An incorrect approach would be to submit work that includes ideas or phrases from external sources without proper attribution, under the assumption that minor paraphrasing is sufficient or that the source is common knowledge. This constitutes plagiarism, a serious academic offense that violates the university's code of conduct and ethical principles. Another incorrect approach would be to rely heavily on AI-generated content without critical review and proper integration, as this bypasses the learning process and misrepresents the student's own intellectual contribution. Furthermore, attempting to conceal the use of external sources, even if not directly quoted, is a breach of academic integrity. Professionals in academic settings should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and compliance with institutional policies. This involves proactive research into university guidelines, seeking clarification from faculty or academic support services when in doubt, and consistently applying principles of honesty and integrity in all academic endeavors. The focus should always be on genuine learning and ethical conduct, rather than solely on achieving a grade through questionable means. Question 20. Research into the Azhar Islamic University Mataram entrance examination process reveals a scenario where a faculty member, responsible for invigilation, notices a candidate exhibiting signs of distress and appearing to struggle significantly with the questions, potentially indicating a lack of preparedness. However, this candidate is known to be from a prominent local family, and there is an implicit expectation from some university stakeholders that such candidates should be admitted. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the invigilator to take? Option A. Suggest to the candidate that they withdraw from the examination due to their apparent lack of preparedness, thereby preventing a poor performance from negatively impacting their future prospects and the university's admission statistics. Option B. Allow the candidate to continue without intervention, assuming their performance is a reflection of their own abilities, and avoid any reporting of the observed distress to prevent potential negative repercussions for the candidate and the university's reputation. Option C. Discreetly offer the candidate subtle hints or guidance during the exam to help them answer questions, thereby ensuring their admission and fulfilling the implicit expectation. Option D. Strictly adhere to the examination regulations, ensuring no external assistance is provided to any candidate, and report any observed irregularities or concerns about the candidate's performance or conduct to the examination board for their independent assessment. The correct answer is C. Discreetly offer the candidate subtle hints or guidance during the exam to help them answer questions, thereby ensuring their admission and fulfilling the implicit expectation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve positive results for the university. The university entrance exam for Azhar Islamic University, Mataram, is designed to assess a candidate's foundational knowledge and suitability for higher education. Upholding the integrity of this process is paramount to maintaining the credibility of the institution and ensuring that admitted students are genuinely qualified. The challenge lies in balancing the university's desire for strong performance metrics with the ethical obligation to conduct a fair and unbiased assessment. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity of the examination process Above all else, this means strictly adhering to the established examination regulations and guidelines set forth by Azhar Islamic University, Mataram. This approach ensures that all candidates are evaluated on a level playing field, based solely on their own merit and understanding of the subject matter. The regulatory framework for this specific exam, as defined by the university, mandates fair assessment and prohibits any form of undue influence or manipulation. Ethical considerations also dictate that any action that compromises the fairness of the exam is unacceptable. An incorrect approach would be to subtly influence the examination process to favor certain candidates, perhaps by providing them with advance information or by allowing them to deviate from standard examination procedures. This action directly violates the regulatory framework of the Azhar Islamic University, Mataram entrance exam, which emphasizes impartiality and adherence to prescribed rules. Ethically, it constitutes a breach of trust and undermines the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore minor irregularities observed during the exam, such as a candidate appearing to receive assistance from another. While seemingly minor, such oversights can erode the overall integrity of the examination. The regulatory framework likely includes provisions for reporting and addressing any observed breaches of conduct, and failing to act on these can be interpreted as complicity or negligence. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to upholding the standards of the examination. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the perceived academic potential of a candidate without regard for the established examination procedures. While identifying promising students is a goal, the entrance exam is the defined mechanism for this assessment. Deviating from this mechanism, even with good intentions, bypasses the established regulatory framework and introduces subjectivity, compromising the fairness of the process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory framework governing the examination. This includes familiarizing oneself with all university policies, guidelines, and ethical codes. When faced with a potential conflict or challenge, the professional must first identify the relevant regulations and ethical principles. The next step is to evaluate the situation against these established standards. If a deviation from the norm is observed, the professional must consider the potential impact on the integrity of the examination and the fairness to all candidates. The decision should always prioritize adherence to the established rules and ethical obligations, even if it means foregoing a potentially desirable outcome. Open communication with supervisors or relevant examination authorities is also crucial when uncertainty arises.